Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. My name is Melissa and my channel is all about psychiatric drug withdrawal reactions and recovery. I had a very long journey myself that included recovery from SSRIs and benzodiazepines. It was very long and very painful, and I learned a lot in the process. I've come a long way, and now that I feel so much better, I have started to coach others going through this process. So if you're interested in chatting, I have a free 15-minute consultation, 30-minute calls, and 60-minute calls, and I will leave the link to my online booking calendar in the description of this video, as well as my website if you're interested in checking out more about my story. I also have filmed videos that go into more detail about my whole story that you can check out on this channel. And if you have a single question to ask me, then I will leave my email address as well. So I don't even know really where to start with this video because it's kind of complicated and I don't have all of the details ironed out, but I felt like everything that I've learned recently is really important to share here, and it comes from multiple different sources. I apologize, I don't look very professional right now. It's a bit of a long story there as well. I've been struggling for the last little while. If you've been following me with something that I thought was unrelated, but I'm not sure so much now if it is unrelated. So I just wanted to hop on here and just kind of start giving you the information that I have. So I apologize for the unprofessional look here, but if you know about my story, so I had a very long and protracted withdrawal from multiple different drugs. I had a disastrous reinstatement. I had very severe symptoms, movement disorder, akathisia, severe mental symptoms, and a host of other symptoms that were very distressing for a very long time. And I had come to a point where I considered myself about 90% recovered once I was about 21, 22 months off my second withdrawal. So I had a double withdrawal, first from SSRIs and then from multiple drugs during a disastrous reinstatement that I was reacting to, including benzodiazepines. So I went into a second withdrawal after I ceased taking those drugs. And it took me about 21 months off everything to start to feel like I was recovering. And then I started coaching at like just this last September. So I think I was like 31 months off. And, I was feeling great, like fully functional again. I wasn't having any real day-to-day issues. I did have some triggers, like if I had lack of sleep or excess stress, or I had to take a medication or something, it would temporarily flare up my symptoms, but not enough to like disable me or anything. I was on disability for 2.5 years because of all of this stuff. But then what happened was I got COVID for what I know was the first time last month. So November of 2023, I was diagnosed with it officially. I believe it was November 16th or 15th. And I had all of the classic like respiratory symptoms. It was quite severe. So I have autoimmune diseases as well. So I typically have more severe infections than other people. Like everybody in my house got COVID as well, but I was the most sick. Just because of my prior health problems. And so I had, the loss of taste and smell. I had severe sore throat. I had, the fever and chills, and I had, nausea, and I had a severe body pain. And I just felt so incredibly ill, and it lasted about 2 weeks. But I had shared during that time, kind of at the tail end of that, on videos that I didn't feel like it was bringing up withdrawal symptoms. I didn't feel, which I was surprised by in my mind, because I know a lot of people who are in withdrawal and have been affected by psychiatric drugs, when they get COVID, their symptoms really ramp up. And so I was kind of surprised I wasn't experiencing that. But about a month after I got COVID, so about mid-December, maybe it was actually, no, sorry, let me back up. Actually, at the beginning of November, I started to notice a rash on the back of my neck. It didn't really feel like a rash, it was just bumps, but they were progressively getting itchier and itchier. So the first date that I can remember having this rash was November the 6th, and I got diagnosed with COVID, and I started getting the respiratory and illness symptoms of COVID on November 12th. And then I believe I got officially diagnosed on the 16th. And it was about, so I felt, really sick during that period of time when I had the respiratory symptoms. And then I I noticed my neck was getting itchier and itchier and itchier. And I didn't, I had actually had the doctor check my neck out when I went and got tested for COVID. And I had no idea, and I didn't believe it was related. And he just said, oh, you need to just stop scratching it. He didn't diagnose it as, eczema or anything else. And I didn't really think much of it. I just kind of was like, I got the COVID diagnosis shortly after, and my neck was progressively getting itchier. Then about a week or two ago, the whatever was on my neck was spreading. So it was under both breasts, and there was a patch of it on my low back, and it was becoming so itchy and inflamed, and that it was almost welts forming. I was scratching day and night. It was affecting my sleep. And then it was spreading even more to sort of the top of my bum crack. Sorry for the TMI, but I think we're past that on this channel. And just looked horrendous. I mean, I could post pictures, but I don't think I need to. And again, I never got a formal diagnosis. I did have my aunt, who's a registered nurse. Actually, I have two aunts who are nurses, look at it, and they thought first one said it was probably eczema, and the second one said, I've seen a lot of people develop rashes after COVID. And I had shared this in one of my other videos, and someone commented, you can have or develop histamine intolerance after COVID. So that's what kind of this video is about. I need to talk about histamine because I'm going to try to make this as precise as possible and to make as much sense as possible, even though I don't have all of the science down and all of the details. But because my itching has been getting so severe, it's literally driving me insane. The only thing that I've found that relieves it is after I have a shower, putting distilled water on the areas. I don't know what it is about, maybe something in the water or that's in my shower water that's irritating it further, and then the distilled water just really kind of calms it. I've been using beef tallow that seemed like it had been working, but now I'm like, I don't feel like this is a skin issue. I think there's something else going on. And my mom had noticed a few times that she's like, man, your face is beet red. And that kind of put off a siren in my head because I'm like, okay, my face is flushing. I have all of these random skin problems. I've never had skin issues in my entire life. And my aunt said she has seen people with rashes after COVID. So I'm getting more and more afraid as time is going on with what's happening. And it's taking me back to the trauma of early withdrawal, where I feel completely at the mercy of my body and I feel helpless because everything you look up online as far as eczema, hives, post-COVID rashes, people are taking heavy-duty steroids, steroid creams, antihistamines, and I have a history of adverse reactions since developing akathisia. I have paradoxically reacted to Benadryl. I had a huge steroid setback this past summer. I shouldn't say huge, but it was intense, but it wasn't super long-lived. Just from a steroid nasal spray, and I'm like, I can't take steroids or antihistamines, so I'm starting to panic now, and I'm like, I can't handle the rashes. I can't handle whatever's going on in my body. I've been waking up in the night with rapid pulse, and this is not something that I had in my withdrawal journey. I didn't have skin rashes. I had rapid pulse as during my reinstatements, but I was having so many adverse reactions. It was causing drops in blood pressure and a high pulse. But I didn't have facial flushing or anything like that. But I know that temperature dysregulation issues happen in withdrawal. So anyway, I start going into research mode, and I've talked on this channel about research mode. And, I've been telling people, stay off the forums, stop researching. There's no cure for this. You will get better over time, which is true. But because all of this other stuff is so distressing for me, I went into research mode. And I mean, I'm an avid researcher. I feel like I've had a lot of health problems my whole life, and a lot of things I've been able to figure out on my own, sort of how to combat and kind of fix myself. Except, obviously, when I went into a situational depression from job loss, I went to the doctor and went on prescription drugs. So back then or psychiatric drugs. So back then I wasn't so much a researcher, but anyway, that's besides the point. So I've been looking up, I've been really studying this rash, and my own doctor, who's like my angel, he got me on disability during my protracted withdrawal. He honestly was like my saving grace. I was so blessed to find him. He just moved away. So I have no doctor now. And I have no trust in other doctors after everything I've been through. So I'm like, what is going on with me? And the more I looked into eczema, I'm like, I'm not sure if that's what it is. And I was talking to my mom, and I'm like, I think this is more like hives. And even if it's eczema or hives, it's not super important, I guess, to differentiate because I can't take the drugs that treat either of them anyway. And when I was thinking about it, I'm like, the treatment for hives and eczema that people often take are antihistamines and steroids. And I'm like, what is the function of them? Steroids lower inflammation in the body and suppress the immune. Well, I don't know if they suppress the immune system. Maybe I'm thinking of different drugs. Sorry. Steroids are for inflammation, and antihistamines are to combat excess histamine. So I was thinking about this and researching this more and more, and kind of the dots are starting to connect, and I'm like, I don't believe this is a skin issue. I'm having other issues like rapid pulse and like flushed face, and I'm like, something else is going on with me. So then I start going down the rabbit holes of mast cell activation syndrome, or MCAS, and histamine intolerance. Now, this is not new to me. I've had people over my years, through withdrawal say, protracted withdrawal or protracted withdrawal symptoms are histamine related. And I would say, no, I don't think that's the case for me. I don't have food reactions. I don't have the typical skin stuff. I don't have, and I was really kind of naive in a sense to all of the functions of histamine and all of the problems that histamine intolerance can cause. And so now that now that I have the skin issues, I've been diving more deeply into that. And I just feel like I have to share this for knowledge sake, because I don't know how many people know all of this. So, and I'm still learning, so bear with me if I get some of the details wrong. But I've had clients and people tell me that COVID long haulers, so people who have neurological and a host of other symptoms after the virus is cleared or after they test negative for COVID, their symptoms are very, very similar to people in protracted withdrawal from psychiatric drugs. And I used to just be like, but COVID long haul is from vaccination. It has nothing to do with just viral load or anything. I was like, that will never apply to me. And again, I don't have the skin issues. So I'm like, so I started researching more deeply into, MCAS symptoms and histamine intolerance symptoms. And I had or have, if you combine my withdrawal plus how I'm feeling now, like 25 symptoms. And I started it was a mix between freaking out and relief because, okay, so bear with me. I'm trying not to make this be too long. But I have a long history of chronic infections, dating back to, I got type 1 diabetes when I was 16, which is autoimmune. I got celiac disease at age 30. So I don't know, 14 years or something after my diabetes diagnosis. But that was undiagnosed for quite a few years. So I had these rampant gut issues. I had autoimmunity. Okay, so both of them are autoimmune. Then that came along after that. I started getting, chronic sinus infections that were, I was being treated with rounds and rounds and rounds and rounds of antibiotics. And they would work for me, but then they were always like a short-term solution because then the sinus infections and problems would come back. So I had sinus surgery in 2010. That helped me. It did help me. And then I go on psychiatric drugs in 2011 for situational depression. They work really well for me for a few years. And then I think in hindsight now I hit tolerance, and then I came off them too quickly in 2018. And I started having all of these crazy physical and mental symptoms, couldn't tolerate it anymore. So in 2020, reinstated, went on benzos, which are mast cell stabilizers. And then, come off that and a host of other drugs I tried in my reinstatement, and then all hell breaks loose and I develop all of these severe symptoms. And so then in that second withdrawal, I really paid attention, not to MCAS and histamine intolerance, but to toxic load and to really settling my nervous system as much as possible. So I quit working and got on disability. I went for walks every day because I was so restless and uncomfortable. And I was out in the sun as much as I possibly could. I switched as much of my products over, my personal care products and my cleaning products, to non-toxic as much as possible. I stopped dyeing my hair. I stopped painting my nails. I stopped wearing makeup, deodorant, like everything. And I really believe that that's one of the reasons that A, I was able to finally recover, and B, I was able to get pregnant naturally at 39 and a half. So I won't get into the whole endocrine disrupting stuff and everything that goes into like toxic care products. That's not what this video is about. But my point is that I really believe that those factors and all of those things I did are what helped me get through my second withdrawal. But I was still having other symptoms that I didn't believe were related to withdrawal or MCAS or histamine, since I feel like I've been recovering from psych drugs. So for instance, if you guys have been following me, about 10 months ago, I moved out of my apartment because I found out that there was mold in there. And so if you know anything about mold can be a big, huge trigger for MCAS and all kinds of problems. So I moved out of the moldy apartment and moved into this newer, like much newer place. And I didn't do any like mycotoxin or mold protocols. I just moved because I was like, I still am afraid of a lot of things because of my sensitivities. And so I moved into this place and I started feeling a lot better, like sinus wise, and just, I was often having like really sore eyes and a really dry burning eyes a lot in my withdrawal. And that part of that might have been due to mold or might have been due to the withdrawal itself. I don't know. But a lot of it significantly improved, like that part of it, when I moved into this apartment. And so I was doing well for several months here. And then I put my daughter in daycare, and then I started picking up every single virus that was floating around. And I was getting sick every single month starting in July. There was the wildfire smoke out here in Canada during the summer. So I was like avoiding going out because I was so afraid of getting sick. And then my daughter was bringing germs home, and I was getting sick every single month. I was sick July, August, September, October, and then November I got COVID. So then I developed these rashes and whatever. I'm going down this rabbit hole of MCAS and histamine intolerance, and I'm shocked not only to learn that like COVID long haulers and protracted withdrawalers have almost identical symptoms. And I was reading that there are some experts saying now, some MCAS experts saying that COVID long haul is just MCAS. That's what it is. It's a mast cell activation syndrome. The cells that house the histamine in the body just become extremely overactive. The virus triggers it. It begins to flood the body, and you get all of these symptoms. So inner vibrations, burning skin, tinnitus, super hot, like temperature dysregulation, a lot of the things that people in protracted withdrawal complain of. I've even heard of akathisia. I don't know if that's true or not. I have heard that COVID long haulers can experience akathisia. So I was like, okay, so some more kind of sirens are going off in my head, and I'm like, I need to look more into this histamine stuff. So I've dove into like some really reputable websites, and I realized, so there have been people that I've talked to along the protracted and withdrawal journey that go onto a low histamine diet. You can read about this on the forums. Some people, like there was a lady that pops out in my head that wrote on the forum. She had akathisia and had all kinds of polydrugging and kindling and had akathisia, and she went on a low histamine, low glutamate diet and, gave her body all of the supplements that it needed, like the vitamins and minerals, and she healed herself in 6 months. And she was like a scientist. So she knew a lot about what was going on in the body and some type of nutritional scientist or something. And I remember reading her story and being really interested in it quite a long time ago when I was on the forums, but I was like, I don't have histamine issues. And so there's a lady who is quite well known in this space, not a drug injured person that I know of, but someone who had severe MCAS. She had like 56 symptoms. And again, a lot of her symptoms sounded like protracted withdrawal symptoms. And she was also on benzodiazepines, antidepressants for her loads of symptoms. So that could have also contributed to her MCAS. But she was able to heal herself naturally. And the people that I've found that heal themselves from MCAS do a lot of the things that people in protracted withdrawal have done. So just bear with me. So people who go on low histamine diets, there are some people in the forums who become so restricted in their eating that they end up eating like 5 foods. But the thing is, you can't avoid histamine. The process of digestion itself releases histamine. Stress releases histamine. You can't avoid it altogether. You can't go like no histamine. And what I've seen is overarching, the bigger problem, more so than histamine, is inflammation. And I don't know, I haven't got all these details ironed out, but what happens is when your body's under a lot of stress, it causes inflammation in the body. Inflammation releases histamine. So if you think about when we're in withdrawal, we have obviously extreme stress, extreme fight or flight. So our body's flooded and loaded with inflammation, which would also mean it's loaded with histamine. Also, benzos. I don't know about the other drugs, but I know benzos are mast cell stabilizers and have antihistaminic properties. So when you come off them, it would contribute to your histamine load even more. And so there's all these things that can contribute, and they call it a histamine bucket, meaning, it's not just like one thing that all of a sudden gives you histamine intolerance or MCAS issues. It's all of these things that accumulate over time that contribute to heightened inflammation, excess histamine. It can be gut issues, liver problems, excess stress, and these medications. And if you think about these medications, they really do a number on, depleting your minerals and vitamins, damaging your gut microbiome, screwing up your limbic system and your fight or flight response, all of the things that are involved in MCAS. And so, and people say too, it's sort of twofold. So the people who have recovered from MCAS, they've lowered the inflammation in their body and went on lower histamine diets. So it's basically anti-inflammatory and lower histamine, and then focused on their stress response. And they talk about limbic retraining and brain retraining programs such as DNRS. And again, this overlaps a lot with protracted withdrawalers, because people who develop chemical sensitivities and all different kinds of symptoms in protracted withdrawal, you can see on the forums there's a lot of people who have benefited from DNRS. And so I'm wondering if COVID long haul, protracted withdrawal, and chemical sensitivities all relate back to MCAS. And I'm wondering if that's what's happened to me. I have a theory now that all along I've had some level of histamine intolerance. I don't like always slapping labels on things, but I don't know how else to describe it. And I haven't been formally diagnosed, but I have like so many of the symptoms. So I think I had either a histamine intolerance or MCAS. There are differences between the two, and I don't know enough to get into all the details, but there are differences. But I'll use them kind of interchangeably just for the sake of this video. So I think that sinus issues. So again, when you think about seasonal allergies and sinus problems and postnasal drip, what is the treatment for that? Antihistamines. What does that mean? You're combating histamine. So I think my years of chronic sort of sinus problems paired with antibiotic use, chronic antibiotic use that destroys the gut microbiome, that has to do with histamine as well. I think was kind of filling my histamine bucket, so to speak. Then taking antidepressants and coming off them depleted my minerals and vitamins further, and made my histamine bucket levels higher. And then benzos made it even higher, and coming off benzos. And then because I was not convinced that I had any type of histamine issue up to this point, again, because I didn't have sort of the classic symptoms that I knew of. I didn't think it was a problem for me. And, but I think I had some level of it all along, and the histamine bucket was building, so to speak. And I also think that my non-toxic lifestyle, my great efforts at reducing stress in my withdrawal really got me to the 90% recovered point. But I think the diet part was the missing piece for me. And that's maybe why I didn't get to the 100%. And I was still, sensitive to some triggers and setbacks. And now that I've had the COVID virus, which can again ramp up the histamine bucket, although maybe it doesn't make sense to me because I think I had lowered it when I was feeling better throughout my withdrawal and my recovery from withdrawal. But I think a virus is quite a humongous stressor to the body, and maybe it can really fill your bucket back up. And because I wasn't focusing on diet much, and I've shared that in videos to this point, then the inflammation was still too high in my body and I was vulnerable. And now I feel like I'm having histamine problems. But I wanted to share that because so I have went hardcore in the last 3 days, super nutrient dense. That's another thing. When you just focus on lowering histamine, you can become nutrient deficient, because if you're only eating like 5 foods because you're like, everything else gives me a reaction, everything else is too high in histamine, your body starts getting depleted of nutrients. It's actually a stressor on the body, which again releases inflammation and more histamine, and it can perpetuate the problem. So from everything I've seen, you have to focus on stress reduction, anti-inflammation, and then lower histamine. And so I've been doing that for the last 3 days, and I, knock on wood, I don't want to jinx myself, but I feel like my extreme itching is getting better. I also noticed that when I get out of the shower, normally when I get out of the shower and have a towel on my head, after I take the towel off, my whole forehead is just blotchy and bumpy, and I have to put makeup on. And it's just like anything that touches my skin is like, and ever since I had COVID, like last night I noticed, this was about 24 hours ago, or maybe not quite that long, it looked like I had a sunburn where my shirt was. Like, it's like things that are touching my skin are irritating it. I also think that, so gluten sensitivity and celiac disease, which I have, can actually show up strictly as skin rashes. And so again, it goes back to the gut stuff. So I really think I'm onto something with this. And I've shared in other videos that I think our livers are overworked. We have improper detox pathways, and that's why we struggle with sensitivities and with healing from these drugs and metabolizing them and adverse reactions, plus the gut brain connection, whatever goes on in the microbiome, which has to do with the immune system and histamine. It's very complex, and I'm not trying to get too scientific, but I encourage you, if you are struggling with symptoms for quite a long time or intense symptoms, to just look into this. And I don't advocate doing anything extreme, especially when you're acute, but just for curiosity's sake, just maybe looking into the MCAS, histamine, all that connection, because the fact that MCAS experts are talking about COVID long haulers being an MCAS issue, and COVID long haul symptoms very much overlapping with symptoms that we experience, I really believe that there's something to it. And especially since psychiatric drugs tend to be mineral and nutrient zappers, and also they tend to be antihistamine in nature. I mean, people with MCAS from something else like mold are getting treated with benzos and antidepressants, and it's helping them, again, because they have those properties. But then they don't realize the rebound effects that are going to happen when they hit tolerance and when they come off. So obviously that's not the solution, but I'm just saying, like, there's hope in healing that. But I just wanted to share my own experience lately, and I'm not out of the woods or out of the clear yet. I still have the rashes. They're still pretty nasty looking, but today's the first day I haven't had to have ice packs on all the areas, like, almost constantly. So I just thought that was interesting to share. I don't know if you've looked into the MCAS connection with withdrawal or the histamine intolerance stuff, but to me it makes a lot of sense, especially, since the healing process is very similar. Or people who have healed from MCAS that don't have to do with psychiatric drugs. It's very similar to the things I've talked about in my videos about healing from psychiatric drugs, except for the diet part. I'm starting to think and realize that diet plays much more of a key role than I've previously stated in videos. And I don't advocate for doing anything extreme. Again, like nothing like ketosis or the lion diet or carnivore or raw vegan. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying I think anything that or like extreme bouts of fasting, because people are like, oh, it increases BDNF and it can restore brain function. I don't think you should be doing anything extreme early on, because I think, again, it adds a stressor to the body that you don't need. But I think also it's important to have this sort of knowledge in the back of your mind, and so that you can explore it. Maybe if you've been struggling for a really long time, or you're just not sure. And this is not any type of extreme diet. It's just anti-inflammatory. It's eating real whole foods. It's not getting too extreme, again, with the anti and super low histamine, because again, you can't eat a no histamine or super low histamine diet, often without becoming nutrient deficient, because you're only eating such a small range of foods. And there's a whole science to once you get so restricted in your foods, your body starts overcompensating, and then it can actually backfire and make your symptoms worse. So you want to be exposing yourself to a lot of different foods, but you want to make sure that they're anti-inflammatory, lower histamine, and very nutrient dense, because it seems to be, and add in that stress reduction factor, which I know is nearly impossible when you're really suffering. But there's things I've talked about in other videos that contribute to soothing the nervous system over time. All of this is cumulative. You have to remember there's no magic bullet for anything for the most part, usually, except for band-aid solutions. So this is cumulative. And again, with diet and with all that, you have to do things over extended periods of time. And even when I've shared about soothing the nervous system, this is not you're going to go for a walk one day and feel better. This is like doing things consistently over a long period of time that do help. And the passage of time itself helps, and you don't have to go into fix-it mode and do everything perfectly, because I've shared that in other videos. You don't want to do that either, where you have to fix, and do this and fix this and do this. It's just something to observe and think about, and just be aware of, because I'm hoping that if I can stick to the diet that I'm doing for the last 3 days long enough, not only will it take me over that hump of full recovery from psychiatric drugs, but also get rid of my rashes and my symptoms I had prior to COVID that I never really connected all together, like chronic sinus issues, chronic infections. I often have a swollen face in the mornings, and just everything that I've talked about in this video. So anyway, I'll stop rambling now. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. And if you're interested in booking a coaching session, reach out to me through my online booking calendar, or send me a quick message on email. And I hope you're doing okay, and I'll see you next time. Bye.